VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Well, thank you, Mr. Morris, and welcome to Crosstalk. It is our privilege to have you join us today, and our topic, I tell you, we've got one here for you. It is dealing with the subject of indoctrination. In fact, our theme today is not just the words indoctrination, but it's the name of a very, very good book that's on the market, and one I think that you need to regard very highly if you have kids in school or even parents or grandparents, to have it to bring some good influence into the family framework. I remember many years back when Samuel Blumenfeld was my guest here in the studios, a man who is very skilled on the truth of real education. He had a book dealing with the Trojan horse of education where indoctrination was occurring. Many of us wonder why it is that we have strange and bizarre things happening with young people who supposedly are being raised in schools where good stuff is being taught. But the Trojan horse that's invading our educational system is our topic today. Our guest is Colin Gunn. He's an award-winning writer, director, and producer, and accomplished animator. He is the homeschool father of 7 who produced a documentary field trip of a lifetime. Colin and his family travel across America in an old yellow school bus, exploring the origins and social impact of public school education. And, of course, our topic today, indoctrination. We say, welcome, Colin. Nice to have you with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on your show.
Colin, I'm very impressed with your book, and I'm also impressed with the people who are contributors to it. And I'm going to just kind of read the list here. R.C. Sproul, Jr., who's no stranger to our audience. Now, my good friend Ken Ham, Doug Phillips, Vodi Bachman, E. Ray Moore. You have Kevin Swanson, Israel Wayne, John Taylor Gatto, Samuel Blumenfeld, and Erwin Lutzer, the pastor of Moody Church in Chicago. So you've got a pile of information in this book. But
yes, absolutely. We went and found some of the best people in America that are speaking out on this subject. So, we believe when we make a book or a movie, we have a movie that goes along with the book, that we find the witnesses, the expert witnesses that can testify it. So it's not just my opinion. The people that speak in this book, they really are worth listening to.
And our guest today, Colin, has a little interesting accent, and I asked him where it was from. He says it's from Scotland. And so if you hear that and you wonder where it's from, that's what this story is. Well, Colin, first of all, you're the father of 7 homeschool kids. Tell us a little about your family and how you got into this homeschool business.
Oh, I'd be happy to. I actually have 8 children now. We have another one that came along since we made the movie and had the book out. So we're so thankful for that. We have a large family here in Waco, Texas, and I had the blessing of meeting a Baylor girl in New York City, and decided that my life would be best set in America, and so I moved over in '99. And so I've been here since, and now I'm an American citizen. So I have I think a privilege of being an American, but also being a bit of an outsider, an immigrant, someone who can look at the culture in America and make some analysis of it. And so when we came over, one of the most striking things that I saw was the big yellow bus. And so it was clear to me, if we were going to discuss the issue of education, that the big yellow bus would be the symbol that we would use in the film. And it's also represented there on the book cover, because it's such a symbol of the educational structure that we have. We have somewhat of a totalitarian rule over education in America. The majority of people use it, and the majority of people submit to the big yellow bus. And so we say, well, what is the meaning of this when you put your child on the bus? Who's influencing them? What's the philosophy that has reigned within the public school system? And we go back in history and find out where all the ideologies came into the public schools that shape the culture of our schools today.
Well, Colin, that big yellow bus is a place, even the bus itself is where indoctrination begins. Not too long ago, in time fragments, it was in Wisconsin where a little 6-year-old girl got into a big yellow bus. And she had been told by her teacher that she could bring any books she wanted to school and read during free time. And so this little girl, coming from a Christian family, decided, I'm going to bring my little Bible. And so she got onto the big yellow bus, and the driver looked askance at that book and said, "What is that?" And she said, "That's my Bible." And he said, "You can't get on here with that. That's against the law." And this little 6-year-old began to cry. And she got on with her little Bible and went to school, and lo and behold, got off the big yellow bus and went into the classroom, and the teacher looked at it again with disdain and said, "What is that?" And she said, "Well, you told me I could bring any book that to read during free time." And the teacher took that Bible and said, "This is garbage," and threw it into the garbage, the wastebasket. Now, that is not the only place where the big yellow bus influence on kids. But here, just this week, being discussed by Mark Belling, one of the anchors in the secular realm of talk shows, is talking about a situation where a bus driver out in New Berlin, it was a parochial school, but the child, every time the school bus would come up to this property where the child lived and would pick up the child, there was a sign representing a pro-life candidate on the lawn. And so the bus driver began to challenge the child about that sign being on there. And finally the child, about 12 years old, said, well, the reason they had the sign there was because they believed in pro-life. And the bus driver made the statement, "I wish you had been aborted." Now, this coming on the big yellow bus, that's before you even get in the classroom, Colin.
Oh, that's so sad. And I think that the fallacy that a lot of Christians have is that the public schools is somehow neutral. As Christians, we don't believe there's any neutral territory. It's either for Christ or against them.
Amen.
And it's only now that it's becoming extremely apparent that the public schools is preaching very clearly against Christians, and Christians are the primary victims. You can have Ramadan celebrations and other cultural events within the public schools, but primarily it's Christians that are being persecuted. We outline it in our film where we have a valedictorian giving a speech, and just as she mentions the name of Christ, her microphone is cut by the teachers. And so you realize, there is a vindictiveness, and that's only it's in the heart of man, the natural rebellion against God and against Christ. But we're seeing it exemplified in the public schools because there's this delusion that you can have a neutral ground when it comes to education. We're saying there's no neutral ground, that if everyone is taught with out regard to the Creator, to glorifying Him, that it's actually a sinful form of education because they're learning practical atheism. They're learning to be humanists because God isn't relevant to them in the classroom. And Christians need to be aware of this, that when they send their kids to these schools, they are influenced not just by that practical atheism, but also by a host of other agendas that they would not like the homosexual agenda, like the Planned Parenthood organization, and a host of other things that really we want to protect our children from.
I want to take a moment and just I have a copy of your book in my hands, a wonderful book, and something that I hope many parents will think about. We will have the opportunity to make it available. It's about 400 pages, 390 pages of vital information with footnotes that are filled, extensive footnotes. And may I say that as we look at the chapter headings, Chapter 1, America's Trojan Horse, Chapter 2, Drugging Them Up, Chapter 3, Dumbing Them Down, 4, Discipline Discipleship, and Chapter 5, On Trial for Christ, A Teacher's Testimony. Number 6, A Tale of Two Masters, Parents or the State. Which does your school board serve? Number 7, Educational Monopoly. 8, Separation of School and State. Number 9, Early American Education. Number 10, A Firm Foundation, a brief survey of the faith of America's founding fathers. Number 11, Pavlov's Child. That's Samuel Blumenfold's special chapter. Chapter 12, the history of history textbooks. I'm sure that has to do with the changing of history. Chapter 13, What Has Athens to Do with Jerusalem? Doug Phillips. Co-opting of the big education by big business. And, of course, we can go on more. There's 23 chapters in mine. But, folks, this is an encyclopedia dealing with issues and the responses from qualified people. Now, you made this thing into a video as well, correct?
Yes, we have a film that's available too, and they go very well together. So the book has a lot more detail than the film for those that are interested in more of an academic response, but also just to learn more of the facts. And there's things we just can't get into a film. A film is an hour and a half long, so we can only put so much in it. But the film is designed to accompany this book. It is very entertaining, and what the story goes that I get in a big yellow school bus, and I drive around America, and the people in the book are actually the people that we meet along the way, and we not only have the experts, which you've mentioned, but we also have the eyewitnesses. So we're meeting people all the time, teachers and school principals, that testify to the things that we are raising. So it's not purely academic. There's real experience and real facts that we bring up in our film that really should open the eyes of those that are still using the public schools. The goal of this film is to really gently and generously talk to those that still use the public school system. And we know they love their kids, but we want to tell them, look, here's some information that you need to know so that you have an informed choice as you put your child on that yellow bus.
Well, and nearly 90% of Christian children are attending public schools.
That's right. So the vast majority, which is really kind of an unusual thing in America, where there's a real still standard for liberty and freedom and being able to be self-sufficient. It is really unusual to me that the majority of Christians will depend on the civil magistrate or the government to pay for their child's education. Now, that's one small part of it, but the big issue, of course, is what do they get for it? So we pay all this money in taxes, and we have a very efficient system. Not only is it anti-Christian, but it's really not a very good system. You have in the government system the most expensive price in some states. It's over $27,000 per child per year, which is just unbelievably expensive. And there's illiteracy in the classroom. You're not getting what you think you're getting.
That's right.
So we're warning people, look, you're getting a very low-quality product. Look at the alternatives, and one of the wonderful alternatives that I practice is homeschooling. I have these 8 kids, and it's not easy, but what we do is we say, well, we can't send them to the public schools, so we homeschool them. And homeschooling is now easier than it's ever been before just because of the access to information through the Internet and also the great curriculum that's out there. And so we are encouraging people to consider that opportunity.
Well, we're coming up on a break here, folks, but if you're interested in obtaining a copy of this book, it's called Indoctrination, Public Schools and the Decline of Christianity. The book is available. The book is for a donation of $18. The DVD for a donation of $22. But if you'd like to get them both, the set of the book and the DVD, it's $35. And if you'd like to call our number, our order number, it's 800-729-9829. And they'll take your order. 800-729-9829. We'll be right back.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, how did our planets form?
Chris, the Bible says God created the planets on day 4 of creation week. The earth had been created on day 1. But among the planets, there's a great deal of variety. Certainly the solid inner planets, Mercury and Venus, Earth and Mars, are quite different from the gaseous planets, including Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus. Actually, each one of these gaseous planets is very different from all the others. Now, you would expect them to be rather much the same, if, as evolutionists tell us, they all formed out of an original disk of gas and particles. According to this, they're all of the same age and would be similar in makeup. But their differences are dramatic and cannot be explained. Chris, a better viewpoint is the biblical viewpoint. That's true of just about everything. The Creator knows what He did, and He told us all about it. back in Genesis.
For more information, call 1-800-743-6374.
And welcome back to Crosstalk. Folks, if you have school-age kids in your family, you need to get a copy of this book. It will clear up some misconceptions about what's happening in our school systems. And again, after you have kids that are in the public schools, you say, well, they're not having robberies or moral attacks. Maybe you have a good school. I've known of some where they've had to have armed policemen there to protect the kids on the inside to keep them in order. But, you know something, just the godless mentality, the issues of, the issues of lifestyle. We're talking about homosexuality being diversity and pressing for diversity training to kids. And, of course, we're not talking about hating people, but when you have abnormal, aberrant lifestyles that are being paraded as normality, isn't there some wonder that parents would be upset? Our guest today has written this powerful book, and may I say that as Colin Gunn has put this together, along with, I think it's Joaquin Fernandez.
Yes.
The book is called Indoctrination, Public Schools and the Decline of Christianity. Some years back, Colin, here in the Milwaukee school system, they had manuals, 3-ring binders, hard cover binders, complete with about, at least an inch of material that had been put together, and they had hundreds of these binders that were being passed out to the teachers. The binders and the booklets were made by GLSEN, which is the Gay Lesbian Straight Alliance. They were hoping to provide vital information to teachers as to how to infuse the subject of homosexuality in a way that would give more normal handling of it, as they talked about Heather has 2 mommies, or somebody else has 2 daddies. Now, we're seeing this type of thing along with the weakness of academic excellence. Let's go into some of the goals of the book. You've got a number of the titles we were touching on. First of all, the Trojan horse concept. How and when did this thing start to invade public education?
Well, it really is amazing. You know, conservatives often make the fallacy that things got bad, with Obama or with in the 1950s or 60s. That's when things started to get bad. Well, they certainly did take a turn for the worse with both of those events, but significantly during the 1800s, there was an infiltration into America by utopianists who had a vision for a different kind of America, not the Christian America that it was largely founded on, and not a nation that was founded on the understanding and belief in the Bible, but rather they believed in a new type of culture, which was utopian. It was perfected, and man was able to be perfected largely through education. So a lot of people like Robert Owen or Horace Mann or G. Stanley Hall decided that was the way to take over America and to fix America was through the education system. And, of course, what it ended up with and what we have today is this massive compulsory education system, which really does indoctrinate. It teaches a whole host of things that you have mentioned. You mentioned the homosexual agenda. Well, we cover that in the film and in the book, where we show that the Trojan horses are those that they give you something and it is deceptive and it actually harms you. And parents sending their children to the public schools, they're not aware and they're often not informed of the agenda that's being taught there. And they use a method called values clarification.
Oh, yes.
That's when they get the kid and they tell them, well, your mom and dad believe this, but, we don't think you're a judgmental kind of person, and here's 2 men who want to get married and all these things. And their hearts are changed, and the saddest thing is their allegiance and their loyalty switches away from their parents as the authority to either the school system, but often it's the school system and their peers that dictate the culture and ultimately the beliefs of that child.
Colin, I'm going to say this, hopefully, to jar parents who've got kids in public school. I mean, we've just entered another school term here in late August into September. But I would voucher or guess to say that I know that there are scores of parents who have never cracked textbooks that are coming home with the kids, or have never gone to a PTA meeting, or have never even asked to see the curriculum that their kids are studying. Would I be right?
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of parents have abdicated their duties, and biblically speaking, the commission is to the parent to educate. It's us as parents that are the ones that have to teach our children the commandments. As you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, that's when we teach our children the commandments of God. And so what we've done is we've entrusted it to others. But there is also a form of deception. Parents have become unwittingly trusting towards these systems that are cheating them. So there's a form of self-deception where parents are just saying, well, I'll just trust the schools and hope for the best. Our film and our book is intended to open their eyes. We feel sorry for them because there's a lot of parents there who hope for the best for their kids, and they trust the school, and they're not getting anything close to what they think they're getting.
Colin, I think your book could also be a valuable tool where listeners today would provide a copy of that and the DVD to your pastors. It will put passion into their hearts if they've never seen this material up close. I've had personally the privilege of supervising the operation and the building of 3 Christian schools over the years. And we started, first of all, here in Milwaukee, and we had several hundred students at the time where we had to merge our school with another fine Christian education because we were also adding radio stations, and we had to decide which direction we're going. But we also had the privilege of helping to set up a school up in Toma and also in Wisconsin Rapids. And having seen the struggle, yes, the financial burdens, but there's also a decision that has to be made among parents in order to get your kids into Christian education. And that is, it's called sacrifice. Because in order to do this, and I mentioned off the air to you that when we started our kids early in their early education in a Christian school, we counted our pennies, and when it came time to see the wear spots in our carpeting, we had purchased a home that had the old sewn carpeting, and it started to look threadbare in some of the joints, and we found out that throw rugs were cheaper than carpeting. And you watched your pennies, but the important thing was that the kids be in Christian education. And when we see what's happening today, could it be that sometimes people are just shrugging their shoulders and say, oh, well, that's just the way things are? But it's people of action who establish Christian schools or who make decisions even regarding what's going on in your public schools. And I would urge you to get a copy of this book and share it. Share it with others. This is powerful material. And the speakers here are very much, now let my people go. That's E. Ray Moore. That is the judge. Am I correct? Is it? No,
that's Roy Moore. And E. Ray Moore is actually has been in the forefront of this battle, as many of these gentlemen have.
Yes.
And they are, like Samuel Blumenfeld, they have been around for a long time saying the things that we say in our book and our film. And they really deserve our attention because these guys are the experts. They are not only very aware of what's going on in the public schools now, but they have studied it for 40 years at least, and know every aspect of where we are, why we are where we are today. So E.A. Moore is a very worthy person to read, and Samuel Blumenfeld. But we also have John Taylor Gatto in there as well, and he was actually awarded Teacher of the Year in New York City and New York State in the same year. Very unusual that you would have a teacher so qualified to actually start to speak out against the system as he has been doing since his exodus from the public school system.
Well, and you have comments for Erwin Lutzer, personal friend. When a nation forgets God, authoritarianism, and government schools, this touches right on the whole issue because morality is decided in these corridors, and you find that kids are subject to being drawn into this, and that's what the kids are being taught. Often like lemmings going into the sea, you find young people. Is it any wonder that some reports are saying that kids, after they graduate from high school or go into college, that many of them are doing what they say is denying or abandoning their faith.
Absolutely. So Erwin Lutzer certainly speaks to that well in the book and the film, and he draws the parallel between Nazi Germany, where you have an authoritarian government that took over the whole nation largely through the youth movement by co-opting all the youth movements into the Hitler Youth, and therefore indoctrinating them into the class of this unbelief and this idolatry of the state. And so sadly, that's what we're seeing very much today, that we wonder why can't people understand the abortion issue or these other issues that are political? Well, it's because they've been indoctrinated, and we really can't fix any political issue until we fix the problem of the public school system, controlling the future of America by controlling the hearts and minds of all the children that are sent there.
And all you need to do, Colin, is lose one generation, and you have congressmen who don't have standards, you have pastors who don't have standards, you have governors and politicians and city authority that have lost their compass, their moral compass, and you've got a mess, and I think we're seeing it played out even today. Folks, let me just say this. This is a powerful book and a DVD that's available. Now, if you want the book, it's $18 donation to VCY America. If you want the video, it is a $22 donation, but both of them are available as a set for $35. And let me give you the phone number. Mary is standing by at the switchboard and be happy to take your orders. You can use a credit card or however you'd like to do it. Now, the phone number is 800-729-9829. 800-729-9829. We're going to open our phone lines, and I know Colin would be glad to answer questions, make comments if you'd like. We would welcome your calls right now. We're going to open our lines here in the studios for comment. The phone number here is 800-733-9829. 800-733-9829. We'll take your calls as the light up here, and looking forward to hearing from you. Colin, we've got about a minute or two before we start taking calls. Back to you.
Well, we are encouraging people to be aware of this issue. We a lot of it is used, a lot of educational talk is used as a political football. But really what your ultimate concern is for your child. It might not even be your child, it might be your grandchild or your neighbor's child. Everyone who's in a public schools or uses the public schools, they need to have this information at hand because it's vital, and it could be vital to the life of their child. We cover a story of Columbine where a man loses his child to a system that teaches evolution, that because as a result of the culture of the school, he lost his own son. So it's really important you hear the testimonies in our film and be warned.
I was talking with Ken Ham about a pastor who was telling his young people, well, he said there are some people that believe in creation 6 days. Some people believe in the Big Bang Theory. He says that's what I personally hold to. But whatever you'd like, that's fine. And Ken put it this way. He said, if you can't be sure about the miraculous power of God to create as the Bible says it, why should a kid believe anything else that's in that book?
Oh, absolutely. I think the faith of many children are undermined very quickly in the science class when they're taught to the Bible is literally discredited in front of them, rather than it being an understanding of real science, which is creation science being taught to them.
Our telephone lines are jammed in the studio here, so we'll take your calls as we come in back after the break. And stick with us and make your call as well, 800-733-9829. We'll be right back.
All of us try to domesticate Jesus. In little things like doubt, anxiety, or fear about the future, we let him into our lives, but only so far, until our control is threatened. Then we send him back to his room, back to his box. In the book, Domesticated Jesus, author Henry Krause takes a hard-hitting, soul-searching look at this atrocity that we commit every day. He challenges each of us to find Jesus as the grand treasure that he is, and to see him in real life more and more every day. He also hits the reader between the eyes, addressing how many domesticate Jesus by wallowing in guilt, hanging on to bitterness, exhibiting anger, being complacent in Sunday worship, hiding our sin, and many more areas that need to be examined. To receive your copy of the booklet, Domesticated Jesus, send a donation of $15 or more to VCY America, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. To donate by phone, call 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
And welcome back to Crosstalk. Just to divert here for a moment, our listening friends up in northern Minnesota, we're looking forward to being up there this weekend, October 13th and 14th, up in Silver Bay, Minnesota. Looking forward to big hymn sing on Saturday night, and then the privilege of speaking on Sunday morning at the church. And we're so grateful as we look forward to being there and meeting many of you that are listeners. You're listening there and you hear the spot announcements in your region with all the details. So be sure to call the number that's given there. And I know that the Palisades Baptist Church, that's a location, and you'll hear the phone number for contact on the network. Also, let's again give the phone number for those who'd like to get a copy of this book and DVD. Perhaps give a copy to your pastor. Probably one of the finest gifts that could be placed in the pastoral library. And that phone number is 800-729-9829 if you want to call and order it. Your credit card is fine. They'll work with you there. Simply call Mary at the switchboard, and by now her helpers as well. 800-729-9829. Colin Gunn, our guest today, the co-author of this fine book. Colin, you mentioned something during the break which I thought ought to be reminded again, that we are facing urgency on this.
Oh, absolutely. We meet it all the time where we have to encourage those there's a lot of people that want to change the system, and I'll say to them often, don't spend the next 12 years fighting the school board and trying to fix the system while your child is suffering within this system that's anti-Christian. There's such an urgency to this that you really need to act now, and we will help you in any way we can. If you email us through our website or, seek help if you are concerned about the public school system, there really is an urgency. Our film makes it very clear with the story of Columbine that you have to really protect your children at any cost, even if it's difficult. You do it now.
And, Colin, why don't we give your website several times now for people to write it down, because you do have a point of contact and resources available.
Absolutely. So they can get hold of me through indoctrinationmovie.com. So that's www.indoctrinationmovie.com. And if they go to that website, they can find out about hosting a screening, or they can get in touch with me if they need any help or any advice about homeschooling. We'll do everything we can to help you. Indoctrinationmovie.com. Yes.
Okay, that'll work. Right now we've got phones lined up here, lit up all across, and we're going to go to Millston right now on line 1 and talk to Dan. Dan, you're on the air.
Yes, first of all, Colin, Vic, thanks for bringing this up. I used to be I'm a retired teacher, and I would have to echo the indoctrination theme that you have today. I would take it a step further, because indoctrination starts at the university level. Mm-hmm. And training new teachers and indoctrinating new teachers and ways to teach in the public school. I really think that it had started there back in the 60s and 70s when I was going to college. There's an old saying, and I like old sayings. We don't have them very much anymore, but the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world.
That's right.
And I think that they've taken that to heart in the education field. And one other thing too, I just think that the schools have become so much of a social club rather than an entity of education. I'm just going to hang up and listen to you guys, okay?
Well, thank you for those comments, Dan from Millston. Appreciate that. One of the things is kind of interesting, Colin, as we're dealing with even the subject of evolution versus creation. where educators are saying to the kids, now some of your parents may believe in that archaic idea, but we don't want you to be trapped in that false information, because we're living in the world of science and technology, and we need you to contribute to the scientific aspect of our world today. So we don't ruin. And then they say to the parents, you go ahead and believe it if you want to, but don't ruin your kid's life. Boy, this is blatant.
Yeah, well, I appreciate Dan. He's one of my favorite kind of teachers, a retired teacher, and one who's willing to be bold on this issue. And we find all across the country when teachers, who you think might be a little bit upset with us not liking the public schools, even if they're still working for the system,
yes,
more often than not they're coming up and saying, yes, Colin, you're exactly correct. In fact, they'll say to me, it's much worse. And so the teacher training issue is a significant part of it. It really is part of what control is all about. Those in the 1800s that established the compulsory school system knew very well, and that if you get the child away from the parents, then you've got control of culture. So that is a very apt phrase of the hand that rocks the cradle. And so when Marxism came along in the 1800s, the 10th plank of the Communist Manifesto was free public education for all. And unfortunately, America has adopted most of those planks wholeheartedly, especially the education one, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing full control over the future of our culture through the minds and hearts of the children that are sent to the public schools.
We're going to go to Mike right now on line number 2, and Mike, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, Vic. Great program.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a couple comments. I think this whole business of the deterioration of society started when Madeline O'Hare took the Bible out of the schools. And I think that was our base for moral and ethical society. And, I can remember, Vic, when I went back, when I was in school, we had what was called milk monitors in the hallways. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, we have a lockdown with armed guards and cameras in the schools and shootings and drugs. And, you have to go back a couple generations. And, it goes back to that theory of the frog and the boiling kettle of water. Mm-hmm. If you have a boiling kettle of water and you throw a frog in, it pops out. If you put it in when it's cold and you slowly turn the heat up, you cook it to death. And I think society has been cooked to death as far as the slow decay of morals and ethics in our society. That would be the analogy that I would like to draw. And also, the churches, you try walking into a church at night. Wow, 40 years ago, I could walk in at any given time and go into a church and pray to God. Now they're all locked. And it's like you got to turn around and go, what's happened here? Something's really, really wrong.
Well, churches used to have an evening service, but apparently there wasn't enough to attract people to an evening service, so most of them are closed.
Wouldn't you agree, Colin, that compared to 40 years ago and even 40 years ago before that, society has just been tossed topsy-turvy?
We're living in a very difficult time. I think you're right about Madalyn Murray O'Hair being a significant party to that. But you have to remember, we also gave the game up earlier on in that we allowed the state to take control over education and become responsible for it, and that led to a large extent the majority of Christians abdicating on this issue and trusting the state. And so when you have a monopoly, that's where these strange ethics come in. That's when you get people like Madalyn Murray O'Hair jumping in and trying to get control of it. It wouldn't exist in a free market where there was many private schools. So all of the bad things are to some extent symptoms of what happened much earlier than the 50s and 60s, back to the 1800s, where there really was a move to have this large progressive system. And you have to look back. The atheists were there back in the 1800s. Dewey, who has a lot of respect, has many public schools named after him, was an avowed atheist. Even earlier than that, we have Robert Owen, who was also an atheist, who established New Harmony in Indiana, but also was one of the leading theoreticians, along with Horace Mann, the Unitarian, which is an unchristian worldview. All these guys were there early on, so we started to see an unfolding of our culture way back then, and we see it manifest throughout our own era in a significant way.
Colin also, and I have met Bill Murray, the son of Madalyn Murray O'Hair, who ultimately became a Christian. And I had the privilege of interviewing him on television just shortly after he had accepted Christ. But I'll never forget that evening. He said that he prayed and asked God to forgive him and asked the public to forgive him for being the instrument that his mother used to take prayer and Bible reading out of the schools. But may I suggest that some of that even earlier became the downfall of America, because the Bible had already been taken out of the homes, or it became a nice bookmark or something on the bookshelf, but cracking the book was something that was not a reality.
We've seen significant changes in our culture, and partly it was in the 1800s we had a lack of trust in the Scripture through a belief in evolutionary science, and a higher criticism that didn't trust Scripture, the authority of Scripture. And so we've seen significant philosophical changes even from the 1700s with all the Enlightenment ideas.
Right.
And so there's many changes in our culture, but the issue of the public schools is it allows your child to be subject to those philosophies, whether it's the gay rights or the progressives or evolution. If you send your child there, be aware that he's open to all of those views, which he wouldn't be if you kept him home or you put him in a private school.
Right now, the news is ablaze with a man who molested children, and he's going to prison for the rest of his life. That's physical molestation. But, folks, there is mental molestation going on in the public school, and the people are getting by scot-free. And I'm not criticizing many fine Christian teachers who are trying to do their very best as they are employed in the public schools, but the molestation is a philosophy that's being pushed overall that literally is a molestation of the mind, and nobody has a penalty for that. Jim in Waniwak, you're on the air.
Yes, Colin, thank you. I had the privilege, I was raised in the Chicago school system, and back in 66 and 67, and then in 72, I went to school in Glasgow, where my mom and dad are from, and I noticed it was pretty darn dangerous in Glasgow, a lot more dangerous in Glasgow than Chicago. My question leads to this. How would homeschool go over there as compared to here? And if all our Christians take their kids out of the public schools, where does the salt and the light that should be there go for the unsaved kids who are still stuck in the public schools?
That's a really good question, Jim. I think we answer it in our film and in our book as well. We believe that the salt and light argument is not apt in this circumstance. We believe that those that are commissioned to teach have to, and be evangelists, have to meet some criteria, and one of those is not being a little child.
A novice, yeah.
And one of the things is the irony is we're putting the very least equipped person as an apologist in the very worst environment. In fact, an environment most of us aren't in, where the Bible is actually mentioned or isn't allowed to be mentioned, or the use of Scripture or prayer is banned. You know, we're putting our children in that hostile environment. And now I commend those that want to evangelize within the public schools, but certainly we're not convinced that sending our children on a crusade, putting their lives, literally their lives at risk, but very much their souls at risk, it's not a fruitful, and it hasn't borne fruit. We haven't seen the conversions. In fact, we've seen a lot of people leave the church. If you imagine if we had a missionary society that sent missionaries abroad, and the majority of them converted to the religion of the place we were sending them to, well, I think we would cease that mission because of its failure. And that's what we're seeing. We really are seeing a failure. And so we certainly need to understand the salt and light. We all have to be salt and light wherever we are, but using our children within the public schools, we certainly don't see it.
We're going to take a break and be back in 60 seconds. This is Crosstalk. Our guest today, Colin Gunn, a co-author of the book Indoctrination, a powerful book and a companion DVD that can be a powerful tool in preparing parents, strengthening pastors, and giving you good understanding of the issues we face. We'll be right back.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewweekend.com. I often hear people say, isn't it okay if evangelical leaders enter into spiritual enterprises and services with unbelievers, as long as those unbelievers are affirming the idea of God, the idea of Jesus, and some of our Christian values? No, it's not okay. In fact, some of those who are saying this are uniting up with people like Glenn Beck, who believe in another Jesus and another gospel. God does not need the unsaved world And he certainly doesn't want even the demonic realm to affirm what we're teaching because it confuses people. We see this in Acts 16, where Paul and Silas were being followed around by this woman who was demon-possessed. And this demon says through this woman, "These men are the servants of the Most High God who proclaim to us the way of salvation." This was a true statement. But Paul did not want the affirmation of a demon. What did he do? He cast out the demon. We're not to enter into spiritual enterprises with unbelievers.
And welcome back to Crosstalk, where we're talking about the importance of good education, Christian education, in a world where secularism is indoctrinating our kids. Now, let me say this, and I maybe get you mad at me, but I'm going to say this. Don't sit there and blink your eyes like a toad in a hailstorm. I mean this sincerely, and I mean it in a friendly way, but folks, you can't just sit here and deal with an issue without saying, I've got to do something. If you get kids in the public education framework and say, well, I don't know how I can afford a Christian education, well, perhaps then something to reinforce or to correct the doctrinal indiscretions that occur that are literally destroying people's faith. Kids that are walking away from the very doctrines that they're being taught. And folks, there comes a day when Johnny or Susie and the moral values that are conveyed as a child become their very own. There's a transition time. And it's one thing when it's academic, but it's another thing when it becomes heartfelt. I mean, as kids, I remember this is what our family standards were, but we were being raised and taught. And well said, Colin, I have never heard of a vicious mission field where the hazards were the greatest and bringing little children in to be the missionaries. This argument does not stand. Right now, we're going to go to Joyce in Taylor, Wisconsin. Joyce, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Joyce. You're on the air.
Yes, thank you. My question is similar to the one before regarding salt and light, but as long as I've been waiting, I'd like to still speak. We have 3 children. We've homeschooled up to 8th grade, and then the oldest is now, he's third-year Bible and theology major at a Christian school, college. And then our second is in 10th grade high school, and he's in the public high school, and he was homeschooled up to 7th grade. And then our youngest now, we're still homeschooling, and she's in 8th grade. And I guess my question is, and I totally understand and agree with what you're saying, we're in a small town, maybe 40 to 50 graduating class. And I guess my question is that we struggle with is, if they should be a light to the darkness, and I totally understand what you're saying about salt and light, but high school isn't young children, it would be older. So what do you think about that?
Joyce, I appreciate your call, and I think I would say to you what I would say to most people who are still using public schools, and that would still the exhortation to take your kids out. And you know, 2 of the arguments you mentioned, one, salt and light, and we've talked about that, but there's another one which is not in my school. That is a considerable other argument that we hear in favor of public schools, and it usually starts with we're in this school, and it's not about, well, Columbine was one of those great schools, and we know that especially at the older ages, more so even than when a child is young, that's when the agenda really kicks in. That's when they really want to win the hearts. Of course, it's not just about the schools themselves, it's about their peers. You know, what really dictates to the heart of a child, it's not the teachers that he's following, it's the peers that are dictating his values, his thoughts. And the truth is, and I know this because I went to public schools myself, if you don't tell your parents those things that you learn, your heart is changed and essentially damaged in a significant way as it's introduced to, you know, what is the lowest common denominator in the public schools, which is the very worst friend will teach you all these things. And so I do exhort you to reconsider. I know homeschooling is difficult and it's challenging. You have done it, but I would encourage those that, especially as issues of sexuality come up, that's when they most need to be protected, because that's one of our jobs, is to protect our child's chastity as well as their heart and their beliefs.
Thank you, Joyce. Appreciate a good question. Have time for just about 1 or 2 more. We're going to Rosanna in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Rosanna, you're on the air with our guest, Colin Gunn.
Hi. Colin, I have a question. I've been struggling with this for a good year now. I feel every day I send my children straight to hell. They're all 5 in public school. How does a single mom, I'm on one income with 5 children, kindergartners to senior, and I'm tortured by this because I want to pull them out. I see the impact. My kindergartners told me yesterday, Mom, it was on the smart board, so it has to be true. And I see it from kindergarten to senior. How I want to pull them, but how does somebody do that when I am a single mom with my children and one income, so I have to support them? How would I do that?
Well, Susanna, I think the option of private school isn't going to be easy for you, but we do find those that are in your situation, being a single mom and limited means, pick homeschooling. And homeschooling is probably the easiest option for you. And, of course, I say it's never easy to homeschool. It's a considerable challenge. But, of course, everything we do in our life that is difficult is usually worth doing. So, be aware that you got to seek help as much as you can in terms of support. So if you can get support from a church or the homeschooling community, I know that that's often the story here, that those that are single parents are able to do it largely through the support of their own network. But, of course, if you don't do it, the costs are going to be significantly higher. Your desire is the right desire, the desire to protect your children. And as difficult as it is to be a homeschooler, especially if you're single, it is so worth it, and it really could potentially save your child's future, their lives, and they will be grateful for it in the long run.
One of the things, may I share this with you, Roseanne, too, is that having been involved with Christian education, there are many homeschool curriculums such as Abeka. There are some other programs available that are available now on DVD and other ways that you can use in teaching children that are older. Also, you may have to, because of your work schedule, have to readjust the education time, even in your family structure. Maybe it's afternoons or early evening where you spend 3 hours or whatever you would need to hit the basics. But again, our prayers are with you, Rosanna, and you raise a good question. May I just say that I trust and pray that there be many churches that would consider a missionary. I mean, we talk about going out and having missionary work to pagans and those who are out there in the foreign field. But in many cases, the mission program within the church ought to also include preparing the children for life, even within their own church family. Colin, I just want to say how grateful we are for your being with us today. Hope many will obtain that book and the DVD. The phone number here is 800-729-9829. Thank you, Rosanna, for calling. And we have come to the end of our program. Colin, we appreciate so much your being with us today. Oh,
absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show.
And folks, take a moment and call that number if you're interested. Again, a special price there. The book, $18 donation. This DVD is a $22 donation. But put them together, it's $35, probably the best $35 you could spend in investing in the lives of your kids and grandkids. Colin, God bless you and your work.
Thank you.
And folks, thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.